Commander Jack Morrison stood rigid as the Galactic Council's verdict echoed through the Grand Chamber. The massive room held representatives from over 30 alien species, all seated in rising tiers that surrounded the central speaking floor. Jack felt small there, the lone human among giants, insects, and beings made of light and gas. "The verdict is final," announced High Counselor Xarn, the ancient Jorn leader whose scaled skin shimmered under the chamber lights. "Humanity is hereby exiled from all Council territories. You have 1 solar cycle to remove all human presence from our space." Jack's mouth went dry. 1 solar cycle meant just 3 Earth years to evacuate billions of people from 37 colony worlds. "On what grounds?" Ambassador Olivia Warren stepped forward, her voice steady despite the shock. Her diplomatic uniform looked shabby next to the ornate robes of the Council members. "Humanity has obeyed all Council laws and treaties." Xarn's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. "Your species expands too rapidly. You adapt too quickly. You question too freely. The Council has observed your kind for 70 years and finds you unpredictable." "Unpredictable is not a crime," Olivia argued. "A jellyfish-like being floated forward. Your military growth exceeds safety parameters. Your cultural influence disrupts established societies. Your technological advancement rate threatens cosmic balance." Jack watched as Olivia tried to reason with them, citing human contributions to medicine, art, and exploration. But the decision had been made long before this meeting. He could see it in the dismissive gestures, the turned backs, the side conversations among Council members. As the chamber began to empty, a tall, slender alien approached them. Council Elder Vixel of the Arcadians looked around carefully before speaking. "This decision was not unanimous," Vixel whispered, 4 arms moving in agitation. "Some of us fought against it. The older species fear what they cannot control." "Will anyone help us?" Jack asked. Vixel's eyes dimmed. "Openly, none can risk it. But there are systems beyond Council space, wild regions where the Council's reach is limited." "You're telling us to go into the darkness," Olivia said. "I am telling you that darkness can hide many things, including growth." Vixel slipped away as a group of Council guards approached. The journey back to Earth was the longest of Jack's life. Their ship, the Horizon, carried not just people but the weight of humanity's future. Jack spent hours in the observation deck, watching the stars and wondering which ones would remain available to humanity. When they reached Earth, the planet was already buzzing with leaked reports. President Natalie Reeves called an emergency session of the United Nations. Jack and Olivia were rushed from the landing pad to the General Assembly. The UN hall was packed. Leaders from every nation sat shoulder to shoulder, their usual disagreements set aside in the face of this new threat. The air felt heavy with fear and anger as Jack and Olivia delivered their report. President Reeves listened without interruption. When they finished, she rose slowly from her seat. At 62, she had led Earth through first contact and the early years of interstellar diplomacy. Now, she would lead them through exile. "Today, the Galactic Council believes they have sentenced humanity to death," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall without a microphone. "They have given us 3 years to abandon our colonies, our stations, our homes among the stars." She paused, looking at each section of the assembly. "They expect us to retreat to Earth, to shrink, to become less than what we are. They think they have contained us." A slow smile spread across her face. "What they have done instead is unleash us." The hall remained silent, hanging on her words. "We will not just survive this exile. We will thrive in it. Without their rules and their limits, humanity will build something greater than the Council could ever imagine. They fear our potential. We will show them they were right to be afraid." Jack felt a chill run down his spine, but not from fear. For the first time since hearing the Council's decision, he felt something else. 5 years after the exile order, the skies above New Titan Colony were filled with ships. Large and small vessels moved in careful lines, forming the greatest human fleet ever assembled. Operation Homeward, the largest evacuation in human history, was in its final phase. Admiral Peter Calhoun watched from the bridge of the Guardian, Earth's largest battleship. His weathered face showed the strain of the past years. They had managed to evacuate 32 colonies already. New Titan was among the last 5. "Status report," he said quietly to his second-in-command. "Civilian transports at 87% capacity. 6 hours until the last ground teams complete their sweep," reported Commander Valerie Kim. "No Council ships detected in the system yet." Peter nodded. They had come to expect Council observers at each evacuation, though the aliens never interfered directly. The Council seemed content to watch humans scramble away like ants from a destroyed hill. "And the FTL improvements?" he asked. Dr. Hendricks sent her latest report. "The new drives are ready for testing. They should cut travel time to the Orion Spur by 40%. This was vital news. The journey to their new home in the unclaimed territories would take months with standard drives. Anything that reduced that time meant more lives saved and more equipment preserved. Down on the planet's surface, Dr. Allison Hendricks was packing up her laboratory. Around her, machines worth billions were being loaded onto cargo ships. Others, too large to move, were being destroyed to keep their technology out of Council hands. "We're cutting it close," said her assistant, pushing back his glasses. "That's the 3rd patrol ship this hour." Allison glanced out the window at the alien vessel hanging in low orbit. "They're making sure we don't leave anything good behind." A young security officer, Lieutenant Ryan Maxwell, appeared at the door. "Dr. Hendricks, your transport is ready. Priority clearance." As they hurried through the emptying science complex, an alarm sounded. Ryan tensed, his hand moving to his weapon. "Attention all personnel," came a voice over the speakers. "Unknown vessels entering the system. Not Council registered. Possible raiders." Ryan swore under his breath. "Pirates. They've been hitting evac operations across the border sectors." The ground shook as something exploded in the distance. Through the windows, they saw ships dropping from orbit, ugly, mismatched vessels that hadn't come from the Council. "They're targeting the civilian transports," Ryan said, checking his communicator. "The Guardian is moving to intercept, but the raiders are spreading out." A massive transport ship, filled with colonists, took fire as it tried to lift off. Its engines sputtered, and it began to sink back toward the surface. "Those are families," Allison whispered. Ryan made a quick decision. "Get to your ship. I'm going to help that transport." Before she could argue, he was running toward the nearest emergency vehicle, grabbing other security personnel as he went. They piled into 2 hovercraft and raced toward the damaged transport. From the Guardian, Admiral Calhoun watched the raiders scatter before his ship's superior firepower. But one transport was already damaged, sinking back to the surface with over 2,000 colonists aboard. "We can't reach them in time," Commander Kim said grimly. Just then, a communication came through. "This is Lieutenant Maxwell. We've reached the transport. Engineering team is working on bypassing the damaged systems." On the surface, Ryan and his team fought off the raiders that had landed near the crippled ship. Inside, they found engineers trying desperately to restore power. "We need 30 minutes, the lead engineer told Ryan. "You've got 5, Ryan replied, sealing the hatch as more raiders approached. What followed was a desperate battle. Ryan organized the security teams into a defensive perimeter while the engineers worked. When the raiders breached their line, Ryan personally held a narrow corridor, allowing the engineers to complete their work. The transport lifted off just as Admiral Calhoun's ships cleared the orbit of raiders. As they rose toward the stars, the colonists cheered the young lieutenant who had saved their lives. Later, as the last human ships prepared to leave Council space, Captain Laura Bennett of the transport New Dawn transmitted a final message. "Remember this day. It won't be the last you see of us." The message echoed across all frequencies, likely reaching every council monitoring station in the quadrant. Then, one by one, the human fleet jumped into the darkness of space, toward their uncertain future. 20 years had passed since humanity fled council space, where once there had been only empty stars and barren worlds. Now 12 thriving systems formed the Terran Confederation. At the center of it all was Novaterra, a world of towering mountains and deep valleys that had become humanity's new capital. Chief Engineer Daniel Scott stood on the observation platform of Mountain Haven, the largest city on Novaterra. Unlike the sprawling cities of Earth, Mountain Haven was built into the rock itself, with homes and businesses carved into the massive peaks. Below him, thousands of workers and machines continued expanding the city. "Quite a view, isn't it?" said a voice behind him. Daniel turned to see Governor Michelle Grant approaching. As the elected leader of Novaterra, she had overseen its transformation from a mining outpost to the heart of human civilization. "We've come a long way," Daniel agreed. "These mountain cities would have been impossible back in council space." Michelle nodded. "Their building codes would never have allowed it. Too innovative, too adaptive to the environment." That was the unexpected gift of exile. Freedom. Without council restrictions on technology and expansion, humanity had developed in ways they never could have before. "The new governmental structure is working well," Michelle said, looking out at the city. "Military efficiency combined with democratic principles. The council would hate it." Daniel smiled. "The council hates everything we do." Far from the capital, the exploration ship Discovery drifted at the edge of Confederation space. Its mission was to find resources and potential allies beyond council influence. Captain Alice Freeman studied the strange ships that approached her vessel. They were unlike anything human engineers would design, organic-looking vessels that seemed to pulse with life. "They're hailing us," reported Communications Officer Greg Martinez. "Audio only, unknown language." "Let's hear it," Alice said. Strange, musical sounds filled the bridge. Greg worked quickly at his station, running the sounds through the translation software. "They call themselves the Velori," he said after a moment. "Nomadic traders, it seems. They're asking if we want to trade stories and goods." Alice smiled. "Tell them yes, and invite their representatives aboard." The Velori were tall, slender beings with 4 arms and iridescent skin that shifted colors as they spoke. They were curious about humans and eager to establish trade. "We avoid council space also," explained the Velori leader, whose name translated roughly as Singer of Dawn. "Their rules limit trade, limit travel." Alice nodded. "We know that problem well." By the end of their meeting, humanity had made its first true allies in exile. The Velori knew other species and other markets, a whole shadow economy that existed beyond council control. Meanwhile, in a research facility buried deep beneath Novaterra's mountains, Dr. Kevin Wright and his team worked on something that would change everything. "Run the simulation again," Kevin told his assistant. The holographic display showed energy patterns folding and unfolding in complex ways. "Sir, it's working," exclaimed a young scientist. "The model is stable." Kevin stared at the display in wonder. For 3 years, they had been working on a new form of faster-than-light travel. The standard drives used by the council races created tunnels through space. Kevin's team had discovered something different, a way to fold space itself. "If this works in practice," Kevin said quietly, "we can reach any point in the galaxy in days instead of months." His assistant looked nervous. "The council would consider this technology dangerous." Kevin smiled grimly. "Good thing they exiled us then. We don't answer to them anymore." That evening, in the Grand Hall of Mountain Haven, leaders from across human space gathered to hear reports from various departments. When Kevin presented his findings, the hall fell silent. Governor Michelle was the first to speak. "If this technology works, we can expand faster than the council ever imagined possible." Admiral Rebecca Sanders, who had served under Peter Calhoun during the Exodus, nodded thoughtfully. and we could defend all our territories effectively, no matter how far apart. As the meeting continued, a message arrived from the Discovery. Captain Alice's face appeared on the main screen, excited but composed. "Governor, council members, I'm pleased to report successful first contact with the Valori species. They're interested in trade agreements and have introduced us to 3 other non-council races in this sector." Michelle looked around the room at the representatives of humanity's new civilization. "It seems," she said with a smile, "that exile might be the best thing that ever happened to us." The exploration vessel Pathfinder orbited a distant planet at the edge of charted space. The world below was mostly desert, with small patches of blue where ancient oceans had dried to shallow seas. Captain William Carter watched the surface scan results with growing excitement. "Those formations are too regular to be natural," he said, pointing to a series of straight lines buried under the sand. "Agreed," said his science officer. "Whatever it is, it's been there for thousands of years." Within hours, a team led by Dr. Sofia Martinez had landed on the surface. The wind whipped sand around their environmental suits as they approached the buried structures. Ground-penetrating radar showed a vast complex beneath their feet. "We need to find an entrance," Sofia said, carefully moving across the sand. Her scanner beeped loudly as she passed over a particular spot. The team cleared away the sand to reveal a smooth metal surface with strange symbols etched into it. Lieutenant Eric Johnson, a linguistics specialist, ran his hand over the markings. "This doesn't match any known language in our database," he said. "Not Council, not Valori, nothing we've encountered." After hours of careful work, they found what appeared to be a door. When Eric pressed a specific sequence of symbols, the door slid open with a hiss of ancient machinery coming to life. Inside, lights flickered on automatically, revealing corridors that stretched deep underground. The walls were covered with more symbols and images showing star systems and strange devices. "This technology is incredible," Sofia whispered, examining a console that still hummed with power. "Whoever built this was far more advanced than the Council." Eric worked tirelessly to understand the strange language. After days of analysis, he made a breakthrough. "They called themselves the Precursors," he told the team. "And from what I can tell, they were here long before the Council existed." The team discovered room after room of preserved technology. There were star maps showing resource-rich systems unknown to human explorers. There were weapon schematics that made their most advanced designs look primitive. Most importantly, there were records of the precursors themselves. "I can't believe what I'm reading," Eric said one night, his eyes wide. The precursors weren't extinct when the Council formed. They were wiped out by them. The records told a grim story. The early Council races, led by the Jorn, had feared the precursors' advanced technology. In a massive war that lasted centuries, they had hunted the precursors to extinction and then erased nearly all evidence of their existence. "The Council was founded on genocide," Captain Carter said grimly. "Their peace was built on conquest." In the deepest chamber, Eric found a final message left by the last precursors. "Beware the Compact of 7 Suns. They destroy what they fear." The Compact of 7 Suns was the original name of what later became the Galactic Council. When news of the discovery reached Nova Terra, it sent shockwaves through human leadership. Governor Michelle called an emergency meeting of the Confederation Council. "These ruins change everything," she said. "The Council didn't exile us because we were dangerous. They exiled us because we reminded them of the precursors, innovative, adaptable, questioning." Admiral Rebecca Sanders stood, her face stern. "We need to secure all precursor sites immediately. If the Council learns what we found, they'll come after us with everything they have." Dr. Kevin Wright studied the precursor technology with wonder. "Their approach to physics was completely different from ours, but I think I can adapt some of their concepts to our fold space drive." The Council debated long into the night. By morning, they had made their decision. Humanity would search for more precursor sites while keeping their discoveries secret. They would learn from the ancient technology, adapt it, and prepare. The council thought they were sentencing us to death, Michelle said, echoing President Reeves' words from decades earlier. Instead, they led us to our greatest advantage. As the Pathfinder prepared to return to the ruins with more scientists and equipment, Captain Carter stood on his bridge and looked at the desert world below. "We're not just building a new home anymore," he said quietly. "We're reclaiming a legacy the Council tried to bury." 50 years had passed since humanity's exile. What began as a desperate flight into unknown space had grown into the mighty Terran Confederation, now spanning 30 star systems. The oldest generation still remembered Earth and the Council worlds, but most humans had been born in exile, knowing only the freedom of the frontier. Admiral Rebecca Sanders stood on the command deck of the massive space station, Watchpoint. Through the viewports, she could see dozens of warships moving in careful formation. This was the Boundary Fleet, humanity's shield against any who would threaten their new home. "Status report," she said to her officers. "All systems at full readiness, Admiral," replied Commander Frank Wilson. "The new precursor-inspired shields are operating at 120% of projected capacity." Rebecca nodded with satisfaction. In the years since discovering the precursor ruins, human scientists had made incredible advances. Their ships were now faster, stronger, and more advanced than anything the Council races possessed. "And the diplomatic situation?" she asked. "The Valori trade network continues to expand," said diplomatic liaison Maria Lopes. 3 more independent species have requested meetings with our ambassadors this month alone." This was another unexpected development. As the Confederation grew stronger, smaller species outside Council control had begun seeking protection and alliance with humans. They brought unique technologies, resources, and perspectives that enriched human space. Far from the military installations, on a planet called New Hope, economic advisor Jason Phillips presented his latest work to the Confederation Finance Committee. The resource-based credit system has been adopted by 17 non-human worlds, he explained, showing charts on a large display. "It's becoming the standard currency in all frontier regions." Committee Chair Stephen Wong nodded approvingly. "The Council's economic grip is slipping. Even some outer Council worlds are secretly trading with us using these credits." Jason smiled. "They can't resist our goods and services, especially the medical technologies developed from precursor data." Meanwhile, aboard a small unmarked ship drifting near the edge of Confederation space, Council Agent Ziv watched human communications with growing alarm. He was one of dozens of spies the Council had sent to monitor humanity's progress. What he had discovered terrified him. "They've spread farther than we ever imagined possible," he reported via secure channel to his superiors. 30 major systems, dozens of outposts beyond that. Their technology has advanced centuries beyond our projections. On the Council capital world, Elder Xarn received the report with increasing dread. The ancient Jorn had been among those who had voted for humanity's exile 50 years earlier. Now, approaching the end of his long life, he faced the consequences of that decision. "We thought they would wither and die beyond our borders," he told the Inner Council. "Instead, they have flourished. Worse, they found precursor sites." The mention of precursors sent murmurs through the chamber. Most younger Council members knew nothing of the ancient species their ancestors had destroyed. "We must contain them," insisted a Jorn military leader. "Perhaps a preemptive strike." "With what?" interrupted Arcadian Representative Tilva, descendant of Vixil, who had warned humans years ago. "Our fleets are scattered across 1,000 worlds. Theirs are concentrated and advanced. A strike would only provoke them." Back in Confederation space, the first generation born entirely in exile was coming of age. Young officer Samantha Reeves, granddaughter of former President Natalie Reeves, graduated at the top of her class from the Nova Terra Military Academy. "The past belongs to those who remember Earth," she told her classmates in her graduation speech. "But the future belongs to us, the children of the stars." As humans celebrated 50 years of exile with festivals across 30 worlds, few noticed the small council observation vessels watching from the shadows. Fewer still realized how the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. The council had exiled humanity out of fear of what they might become. Now that fear was becoming reality. The exiles had built not just a new home, but the foundation of an empire that would soon challenge the very power that had cast them out. A century had passed since humanity's exile from council space. What began as a desperate evacuation had transformed into one of the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. The Terran Confederation now spanned over 100 star systems, with technology that surpassed even what the precursors had left behind. Grand Admiral Henry Wallace stood on the bridge of the Defiant, the flagship of humanity's fleet. At 76, he had spent his entire life in service to the Confederation. Now he commanded the most powerful armada in known space. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said his executive officer. Henry nodded. "Then it's time to deliver our message." The massive fleet jumped into fold space, using the technology that had given humanity its edge. In seconds, they traveled distances that would take Council ships weeks to cross. When they emerged, they were at the very edge of Council territory. "Broadcast on all frequencies," Henry ordered. "Let's make sure they hear us." Ambassador Nicole Brooks stepped forward. At 42, she represented the new face of humanity, confident, poised, and unafraid. Her image would be transmitted to every Council world and outpost in range. "To the honored members of the Galactic Council," she began. 100 years ago, you exile humanity from your space. Today we return, not as supplicants, but as equals. The Terran Confederation wishes to re-establish diplomatic relations. On the Council homeworld, the message caused chaos. Emergency sessions were called as ancient enemies debated how to respond to the humans' return. "They mock us by coming to our borders with warships," snarled the Xorn representative. "They protect themselves, as any would when approaching those who once harmed them," countered the Arcadian delegate. The council was divided. Some feared human advancement and wanted to reject the offer outright. Others saw opportunity in renewed trade and cultural exchange. A few, remembering ancient wrongs, secretly welcomed the idea of a power that could challenge Xorn dominance. After days of heated debate, the council delivered its response. Humanity could establish a single diplomatic outpost near council space, but would need to accept strict limits on its expansion and military presence. When Ambassador Brooks received these terms, she smiled politely. "The Confederation respectfully declines these restrictions. We seek equal relations or none at all." As the diplomatic standoff continued, several council member species began reaching out through secret channels. The Arcadians, who had always been sympathetic to humans, were the first. "The council's power is not what it once was," their representative told Nicole in a hidden meeting. "Many worlds chafe under Xorn control." The humans' return had exposed fractures in the council that had been growing for decades. Smaller species saw in humanity a potential protector against the older, more powerful races. While negotiations continued openly, hidden plots formed in the shadows. On a remote outpost near the border, a faction of hardline council military leaders gathered. "The humans must be taught a lesson," declared Admiral Vex of the Xorn fleet. "A single strike to remind them of their place." Without council approval, Vex ordered an attack on a small human research station. 3 council warships dropped out of light speed and opened fire without warning. They expected an easy victory against the isolated outpost. What they found instead was technology far beyond their understanding. The station's shields, based on adapted precursor designs, easily absorbed their weapons' fire. Then, faster than should have been possible, human ships appeared from fold space. Captain Olivia Daniels, commanding the rapid response cruiser Swift Justice, faced the attackers with calm determination. "This is an unprovoked attack on a civilian research facility," she transmitted. "Cease fire immediately." The council ships, shocked by the human vessel's sudden appearance, responded by intensifying their attack. It was the last mistake they would make. The battle lasted less than 5 minutes. The human ship moved with impossible speed, its weapons slicing through Council shields as if they weren't there. 2 attacking vessels were disabled, the third destroyed when its captain chose to self-destruct rather than surrender. News of the attack spread quickly through both human and Council space. What the Council hardliners had intended as a show of strength instead revealed their weakness. More importantly, it united the Confederation in righteous anger. "We came in peace," Grand Admiral Wallace told the emergency session of the Confederation Council. "They answered with war." The unprovoked attack on a human research station changed everything. Across the 100 worlds of the Terran Confederation, anger united humanity in a way not seen since the original Exile. Public opinion shifted from cautious diplomacy to demands for justice. President Christopher Morgan addressed the combined fleet from the bridge of the flagship Aurora. At 58, he had spent his entire political career working toward peaceful relations with the Council. Now he faced the possibility of war. "We did not start this conflict," he told the thousands of officers watching via holographic link. "We offered friendship and were met with violence. But remember this, we come not for revenge, but justice." The human fleet moved with purpose, using their fold space technology to appear simultaneously at multiple points along the Council border. The Council races, used to having weeks or months to prepare for an enemy's approach, found themselves suddenly facing advanced warships appearing directly in their systems. In the Council capital, panic spread. "How can they be in 7 systems at once?" demanded the Shorn High Commander. "Our defense grids cannot track their movements." The Arcadian representative spoke calmly. "They developed fold space technology decades ago. We ignored the reports, believing them impossible. Human ships penetrated deep into Council space with ease. Unlike the Council forces that had attacked the research station, they targeted only military installations and government facilities, avoiding civilian casualties. Admiral Wallace directed the main fleet with surgical precision. "Disable, don't destroy," he ordered. "Show them the difference between their brutality and our restraint." Meanwhile, Captain Linda Freeman led a specialized team on a different mission. Intelligence had discovered that several dozen humans were still held prisoner in secret Council facilities, diplomats and civilians captured during the original Exile. "Prepare boarding teams," Linda ordered as her ship, the stealth cruiser Phantom, approached a heavily guarded prison station. "Non-lethal methods only. The prisoners have waited 100 years for rescue. Let's not keep them waiting any longer." The raid was swift and precise. Using personal shield technology adapted from precursor designs, Linda's team moved through the station, overwhelming guards with stun weapons. In the deepest cells, they found 13 human prisoners, aged but alive, kept in stasis for decades as subjects of forbidden experiments. "The Council will deny they knew about this," said Linda's second-in-command as they guided the frail survivors to their ship. Linda's face hardened. "Then we'll make sure everyone knows." As the human advance continued, 4 Council species, the Arcadians, Velothi, Mantu, and Durrani, formally broke from the Council and declared neutrality. Their ambassadors secretly contacted human forces, seeking protection and alliance. "The Jorn have dominated us for too long," the Velothi ambassador told Chief Diplomat Paul Bennett. "Many of us opposed humanity's exile a century ago. We welcome your return." After 2 weeks of precise strikes that crippled the Council's military capabilities without a single civilian casualty, President Morgan offered terms: full recognition of human space, reparations for the exile, and the right to establish embassies on all Council worlds. "This is outrageous," sputtered the Jorn elder in the emergency Council session. "We will never submit to human demands." But the reality was clear. The Council had lost. Their fleets were in disarray, their defenses breached, their union fractured. Many Council worlds now openly called for acceptance of human terms. In a final, desperate move, Council extremists deployed forbidden weapons, planet killers that had been outlawed for millennia. 3 massive ships emerged from hidden bases, setting course for Nova Terra, the heart of human civilization. They mean to destroy our homeworld, Admiral Wallace reported grimly to President Morgan. The same way they once destroyed the precursors. President Morgan's face showed no fear, only resolve. They failed to eliminate one advanced civilization. Now they'll learn they failed with 2. The human fleet moved to intercept the planet killers, knowing the fate of their civilization hung in the balance. The true test of humanity's power was about to begin. 3 massive Council planet killers moved steadily toward Nova Terra, carrying weapons capable of cracking a world in half. The human fleet rushed to intercept, but many feared they would not arrive in time. On Nova Terra, Dr. Andrea Simmons worked frantically in her laboratory deep within the mountain city. For years, she had led a secret project studying the most advanced precursor defense systems. Now that work would face its ultimate test. "Power level stable," reported her assistant as they activated the planetary shield grid. "But we've never tested it at full capacity." Andrea took a deep breath. The precursors built this technology to withstand the very weapons now aimed at us. It will hold. In space, the Council planet killers approached the outer defense line. They fired their main weapons, beams of energy so powerful they could vaporize smaller ships instantly. But instead of striking their targets, the beams curved around, contained by an invisible force. "What is happening?" demanded the Jorn commander. "Our weapons are being deflected." The revolutionary defense system designed by Dr. Simmons didn't just block the attacks. It captured the energy and redirected it. The planet killers found their own power turned against them, their shields failing under the strain. As the Council ships faltered, the human fleet arrived. Admiral Wallace gave the order: "Capture those vessels intact. The galaxy needs to see what they attempted here today." The battle was swift and decisive. 2 planet killers were disabled and boarded. The 3rd self-destructed rather than surrender. When human forces reached the command centers, they discovered the truth. The attack had been ordered by the highest levels of the Council leadership. With this evidence in hand, President Morgan made a bold decision. "We're going to Zenith Station," he announced to his advisors, the Council capital itself. Using fold space technology, the human fleet appeared directly above Zenith Station, the massive space city that had served as the Council headquarters for thousands of years. There was no resistance. The remaining Council forces, seeing what had happened to the planet killers, stood down. Human troops led by Admiral Wallace occupied key positions throughout the station. For the first time in its long history, the Council chamber was filled with human soldiers. "We do not come as conquerors," President Morgan told the assembled representatives of hundreds of species. "We come to build a better future for all." The corrupt Council leadership was removed from power. Evidence of their crimes, not just against humanity, but against dozens of species over thousands of years, was displayed for all to see. The truth about the precursors' genocide, hidden for millennia, was finally revealed. For too long, a few powerful species have ruled through fear and manipulation, Morgan said. Today that ends. In the days that followed, a new galactic accord was established with humanity as the senior member. Species that had been dominated for centuries found their voices heard for the first time. Technological advancements, once restricted by the Council, were now shared freely. Former enemies became allies under human protection and guidance. The Arcadians, who had secretly helped humanity since the exile, were honored with special status. Even many Jorn, freed from their corrupt leadership, joined the new alliance. 105 years after being cast out from galactic society, humanity stood at its center. The exiles had built not just a new home, but a mighty empire spanning half the galaxy. An empire founded not on conquest, but on justice and cooperation. In the rebuilt Council chambers, now called the Hall of Worlds, President Morgan addressed representatives from 200 species. "We were exiled because they feared what we might become," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. They were right to be afraid, but wrong about why. He looked around at the diverse gathering, former enemies and new allies, all united under human leadership. They feared we would become conquerors. Instead, we became protectors. They feared we would destroy. Instead, we have built. Today marks not the birth of human domination, but the beginning of a new era where all species rise together. As the hall erupted in applause, Admiral Wallace stood with Dr. Simmons at the back of the room. "Not bad for a species that was supposed to die in exile," he said with a smile. Dr. Simmons nodded. "The greatest empires aren't built through conquest, but through resilience. They tried to break us, and instead, they made us stronger." Outside the windows of the hall, ships from 100 worlds moved peacefully through space. At their center, the Aurora displayed the flag of the new Galactic Union, a symbol of unity created by the very people once cast out as too dangerous to belong.